Something absolutely staggering just happened live on air, sending shockwaves through the Labour Party and leaving Keir Starmer blindsided in real time. A sitting Labour MP has done the unthinkable. In front of the nation, she defied Starmer's authority and called for the immediate release of Lucy Connelly, the woman jailed for a viral social media post after a tragic event. This moment wasn't planned, it wasn't rehearsed, it was raw, emotional, and explosive. Starmer sat frozen, caught off guard by a rebellion unfolding before his eyes. The broadcast cut to chaos, but by then the damage was done. Starmer's iron grip on Labour has been shattered, and the whole country is watching what happens next. The tension inside the Labour Party has reached a boiling point, and it all erupted in front of millions. Viewers tuning in to what was expected to be a routine political interview were stunned when Mary Glendon, a veteran Labour MP known for her principled stance but not for drama, suddenly turned the entire segment into a national crisis. Without warning, she looked directly into the camera and demanded justice for Lucy Connelly, a mother sentenced to prison for a post written in the raw aftermath of tragedy. Lucy's message, an emotional outburst on social media, went viral, just hours after the brutal killing of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance event. Though her words were charged and deeply controversial, many saw them as a mother's grief, not a calculated incitement to hate. But the courts didn't see it that way. She was sentenced to nearly 3 years behind bars, her daughter left. Motherless. Until now, no Labour figure dared to speak out publicly in her defence. The party, tightly controlled by Keir Starmer's cautious leadership, avoided the topic like a landmine. Even former firebrands like Jeremy Corbyn refused to touch the issue. But that silence shattered the moment Glendon stood up and said, "Leave." On national television, Lucy Connelly is not a danger to society. She's a grieving mother punished for expressing pain. Her voice was steady, but her message struck like a thunderclap. The interviewer looked stunned. The studio went silent. In that one moment, the fragile unity within Labour splintered wide open. Starmer, watching from party headquarters, was reportedly furious. This wasn't just a policy disagreement, it was a direct challenge to his authority. Glendon's words weren't cleared, weren't coordinated, and weren't backed by the leadership. Yet she spoke with moral conviction, and that's what made it so dangerous. In the hours that followed, social media exploded. Hashtags calling for Lucy's release surged. Political commentators rushed to react. Conservative voices like Nigel Farage praised Glendon's courage, calling her the only one in Labour with a spine. Meanwhile, Labour's internal messaging. Teams scrambled to contain the damage, but it was already spiralling out of control. Glendon later clarified her stance in a follow-up interview, saying, "I'm not defending what was said, I'm defending the right to mourn without being thrown into a prison cell." She described Lucy's case as a human rights issue, drawing parallels to how the justice system often fails to understand emotional trauma. "There's a difference between hate and hurt," she said. Lucy wasn't preaching violence, she was reacting to horror. Her words stirred both sympathy and rage. Victims' families condemned the timing of the defence. Activists on the far left accused Glendon of undermining hate speech laws. But for many ordinary Britons watching from home, it felt like someone had finally said what they were thinking, that the system had gone too far, too fast, and with too little compassion. Behind the scenes, Starmer's team faced a nightmare scenario. Mary Glendon isn't a fringe MP. They can't dismiss her as a rogue actor. She's respected, long-serving, and carries weight within Labour's old guard. Disciplining her would risk further public backlash. Ignoring her could make Starmer look weak. The leadership is now cornered, caught between enforcing party discipline and facing a public relations catastrophe. One senior Labour aide reportedly said, "This is the worst-case scenario. Glendon has just ripped the mask off the party." And this isn't happening in isolation. It comes amid growing unrest over Labour's perceived drift away from traditional working-class values and towards sterile, elite-driven politics. Lucy Connelly's case, emotional and divisive as it is, has become a lightning rod for wider anger about freedom of speech, criminal justice, and moral leadership. Glendon's on-air defiance has now become a rallying cry, one that Keir Starmer can no longer ignore or suppress. The political storm engulfing Keir Starmer intensifies as the Labour leader grapples with a crisis that extends far beyond Mary Glendon's televised defiance. While the party reels from this unprecedented internal rebellion, Starmer faces a second, equally perilous threat, an explosive $30 billion deal involving the Chagos Islands that has ignited fierce criticism across the political spectrum. This deal, which Starmer argues is a strategic move to strengthen Britain's alliances with global powers such as the United States, NATO and India, is being painted by opponents as a betrayal of British sovereignty and national security. The timing could not be worse. With Labour's internal cohesion fracturing, the party finds itself under relentless attack from the right wing, emboldened by the perception that Starmer's leadership is unravelling both morally and politically. Foysi. Chagos Islands controversy strikes at the core of Britain's post-Brexit identity and its ongoing struggle to define its place on the global stage. Historically, these islands have been a symbol of colonial power and contentious sovereignty disputes, with the indigenous Chagosian people forcibly removed decades ago to make way for a US military base. Starmer's approval of this $30 billion agreement has been framed by critics as a humiliating surrender, an act that compromises British territorial claims and undermines national security interests in favour of diplomatic expediency. Prominent right-wing figures, including Nigel Farage and Tory leader Ken Bonne, have unleashed a barrage of attacks, accusing Starmer of sacrificing Britain's sovereignty to appease international allies and left-wing legal interests. This framing resonates with a growing segment of the electorate disillusioned by perceived government overreach and loss of national pride. Within Parliament, the backlash has been swift and brutal. Tory shadow ministers have seized on the opportunity to portray Starmer as reckless and out of touch, highlighting what they describe as the reckless squandering of taxpayers' money on a deal that weakens Britain's strategic position. Some former Reform UK MPs, emboldened by the turmoil, have gone so far as to demand Starmer's resignation, arguing that the Labour leader has betrayed the country's interests at a moment when unity and strength are paramount. These voices, amplified by a hostile media landscape, contribute to a growing narrative that Starmer's Labour is no longer a credible alternative to the Conservative government, but a liability undermining British sovereignty and security. Starmer's defence of the deal hinges on the argument that it aligns the UK with key global allies, strengthening partnerships vital to countering China's rising influence and securing Britain's role on the international stage. He frames the agreement as a strategic necessity, a move that reinforces Britain's commitment to collective security through NATO and cooperation with democratic nations. Yet this explanation struggles to quell the storm at home. The optics of the deal clash sharply with the domestic message Starmer has tried to cultivate, one of prudence, fairness and national renewal. Instead, the deal fuels accusations that Starmer's Labour is disconnected from the concerns of ordinary Britons worried about sovereignty, immigration and economic stability. The confluence of these two crises, Mary Glendon's rebellion and the Chagos Islands deal, places Starmer in a political vice grip. Internally, he faces growing unease within Labour's ranks. Some MPs sympathise with Glendon's call for compassion and justice, seeing her stance as a much-needed critique of the party's increasingly rigid approach to law and order. Others fear that allowing this dissent to go unchecked will fracture party discipline and weaken Labour's electoral prospects. Meanwhile, outside Parliament, the public mood is fracturing along ideological lines, with some segments rallying behind Glendon's message of mercy and others echoing right-wing condemnation of Starmer's foreign policy decisions. The result is a party caught between conflicting demands, struggling to maintain coherence while navigating an increasingly hostile political landscape. Behind the scenes, Labour's leadership team is reportedly engaged in urgent damage control efforts. Communications strategists are attempting to recalibrate the party's messaging, emphasising Starmer's commitment to security and alliance building while downplaying Glendon's defiance as an isolated incident. However, these efforts are complicated by the viral nature of the controversies, which continue to dominate social media conversations and fuel widespread debate. The media spotlight remains fixed on Labour, with opinion polls beginning to show signs of erosion in public support. Analysts warn that if Starmer fails to manage the fallout effectively, the party risks losing not only voter trust, but also the loyalty of key MPs and activists, crucial for the next general election. Adding to the pressure is the broader context of Labour's ongoing identity crisis. The party has long struggled to reconcile its working-class roots with an increasingly urban, progressive base. Starmer's leadership, while aiming for modernisation and electoral viability, has alienated some traditional supporters who feel the party has drifted too far from its core values. The Lucy Connelly case and the Chagos Islands deal have become flashpoints in this larger battle over Labour's soul, crystallising fears that the party is losing touch with the very people it claims to represent. As Glendon's defiance inspires calls for greater empathy and justice, the foreign policy scandal reinforces concerns about Starmer's commitment to national interests and sovereignty. Looking ahead, the path for Keir Starmer is fraught with uncertainty. The twin crises expose deep divisions within Labour and highlight vulnerabilities that opposition parties are eager to exploit. Starmer's response will be critical. Will he clamp down on dissent to restore party discipline, risking alienation and further rebellion? Or will he embrace a more inclusive, compassionate approach, potentially fracturing the party but winning public sympathy? On the foreign policy front, will Starmer double down on his alliance-building strategy, or will he backtrack under mounting pressure to protect Britain's sovereignty? The decisions made in the coming weeks will not only define Starmer's leadership, but also shape the political landscape of the UK for years to come. In sum, Keir Starmer finds himself at a crossroads. Faced with a Labour MP openly challenging his authority over a highly sensitive justice issue and a foreign policy deal that has ignited a firestorm of criticism, his leadership is under unprecedented strain. The unity of his party is threatened from within, while his patriotism is questioned from without. As these crises collide, the fate of Labour and potentially the future of the UK hangs in the balance. The nation watches, waits and wonders. Can Starmer weather this perfect storm, or will it be the beginning of his downfall? As the political pressure mounts, the spotlight turns intensely toward Mary Glendon and the wider implications of her defiance within Labour. Her public support for Lucy Connelly's release has not only rattled the party, but has also sparked a broader debate about justice, empathy, and the limits of political loyalty. Glendon's bold stance challenges Labour's tightly controlled narrative under Starmer, forcing the party to confront uncomfortable questions about its values and priorities. Her decision to prioritise compassion over party discipline has resonated deeply with certain sections of the public, especially those critical of what they perceive as harsh punishments for expressions of grief and frustration in a highly charged social climate. This has created an emotional undercurrent that complicates Starmer's efforts to maintain a united front and control the narrative. The controversy surrounding Lucy Connelly is emblematic of a larger cultural and political clash. Connelly's post, written in the raw aftermath of a devastating tragedy, struck a nerve across the country, raising urgent questions about free speech, hate speech, and the role of context in legal judgments. Critics argue that Connelly was unfairly targeted and excessively punished for an emotional outburst, while others insist that any form of hate speech must be met with firm consequences to protect vulnerable communities. This debate touches on the heart of Labour's struggle to balance law and order with justice and mercy. Glendon's public support has turned this abstract policy dispute into a very personal and tangible crisis for the party, highlighting the human cost behind political decisions. Within Labour, the response to Glendon's defiance has been mixed and fraught with tension. Some MPs admire her courage and the moral clarity of her position, seeing it as a necessary corrective to the party's rigid stance on justice issues. Others view her actions as reckless and potentially damaging to Labour's electoral prospects, fearing that internal dissent will be exploited ruthlessly by opponents eager to paint the party as divided and unstable. Party insiders reveal that Starmer's leadership team is deeply concerned about the potential for a wider rebellion, especially as Glendon's position inspires grassroots activists and other MPs to question the party's direction. The leadership faces the delicate task of managing internal fractures while projecting strength and unity to a wary electorate. At the same time, the right-wing media and political opponents are capitalising on the unfolding drama. They portray Glendon's defiance and the wider controversy as evidence of Labour's decay and moral confusion under Starmer. The narrative crafted by critics is clear. Labour is a party in chaos, unable to enforce discipline or protect British values. This framing plays directly into the hands of figures like Nigel Farage and Tory leader Ken Bonne, who use the moment to galvanise their supporters and push the message that Labour's leadership is unfit to govern. The media coverage has been relentless, with headlines and sound bites amplifying the sense of crisis and deepening public distrust in Starmer's ability to control his party or represent the nation effectively. Amid these external and internal pressures, the Labour rank and file finds itself at a crossroads. Grassroots members and activists are divided, with some rallying behind Glendon's call for compassion and others concerned that the controversy will harm the party's chances. In upcoming elections, the tension reflects broader debates within British society about justice, identity and governance, with Labour caught in the middle of these fault lines. The party's messaging team is tasked with walking a tightrope, seeking to reassure traditional supporters without alienating progressive voters who demand both justice and empathy. This balancing act is proving increasingly difficult as the crisis deepens. Further complicating matters is the broader political context in which these events are unfolding. Starmer's Labour faces not only internal dissent and right-wing attacks, but also the challenge of responding to a rapidly shifting electorate. Economic uncertainty, concerns over immigration, and questions about national sovereignty are high on voters' minds. In this environment, issues like the Lucy Connelly case and the Chagos Islands deal take on outsized significance. They become symbols of larger anxieties about justice, fairness, and Britain's place in the world. How Starmer navigates these controversies will influence public perception of his leadership and Labour's ability to reconnect with disillusioned voters. The stakes could not be higher. Labour's future depends on its ability to reconcile competing demands within its own ranks while presenting a coherent and compelling vision to the British people. Glendon's defiance is a test of Starmer's leadership style and political strategy. Will he embrace a more open and empathetic approach that acknowledges the complexity of these issues, or will he double down on discipline and control to maintain order? The answer will shape not only the immediate fallout, but also the long-term direction of the party. As Labour grapples with these questions, the wider public watches closely, aware that the consequences extend far beyond Westminster. Ultimately, Mary Glendon's stand has exposed deep fissures within Labour that cannot be ignored. The party faces a moment of reckoning between rigidity and compassion, unity and dissent, tradition and transformation. How Starmer chooses to respond will determine whether Labour emerges from this crisis strengthened and renewed or fractured and weakened. The coming weeks promise to be defining for the party's identity and for British politics as a whole. If you found this deep dive into Labour's unfolding crisis insightful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more breaking political updates. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Keir Starmer can hold his party together, or is this the beginning of the end for Labour? Stay tuned and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of the latest developments shaking the UK political landscape. Your voice matters. Join the conversation now.